Everything changed in a matter of months. What we are witnessing right now in Atlanta is not just a standard offseason. It is the absolute total reconstruction of a franchise, built on a razor-thin foundation of massive risks, intense internal friction, and moves that have left analysts completely, fundamentally polarized. You look at this roster and you see a tightrope walk over a canyon. Welcome back to NFL Nexus. This is the place where we cut through the noise, ignore the fluff, and break down the most compelling stories in football through the cold, hard numbers and the facts that actually matter on Sundays. I am your host, and today we are diving deep into an explainer of the absolute boldest moves, the most intense, job-threatening training camp battles, and the highly calculated gambles that are entirely defining the Atlanta Falcons' 2026 offseason. But before we get into the heavy details, before we unpack the drama unfolding in Flowery Branch, make sure you subscribe to the channel right now. Drop a like on this explainer, and I want you to comment down below with exactly what you think the Falcons' final record will be this year. Also, if you really love this kind of immersive, deep dive analytical content, please consider supporting the channel by becoming a channel member. It helps us keep doing what we do. Okay, let's dive into this. Because the stakes for Atlanta have literally never been higher. I'm serious. Every single decision made this spring, every dollar spent, every draft pick made, it could literally be the difference between a deep, legendary playoff run and a total catastrophic organizational collapse. There is no middle ground here.
To really understand where this team is truly headed in 2026, we're going to follow this roadmap. First, we'll look at the new leadership duo. Second, we dive into the quarterback competition. Third, we break down the Jahan Dotson gamble. Fourth, revamping the Falcons secondary. And finally, embracing the mentorship role.
Section 1. The new leadership duo. Okay, so the Atlanta Falcons are completely, from the ground up, resetting their offensive identity. And at the center of this absolute overhaul is a brand new head coach. We are talking about two-time NFL Coach of the Year, Kevin Stefanski. Now, let's just pause and think about what that actually means. Bringing in a guy like Stefanski, it is a massive neon flashing signal of intent from this front office. You do not bring in an offensive mind with his specific, highly lauded pedigree unless you are utterly desperate to maximize your offensive talent immediately, like yesterday. But here's the catch. Putting his system in place, especially a system that relies so incredibly heavily on timing, on precise route running, and a deeply complex running scheme, it leads to the ultimate overarching question hanging over this franchise right now. Where exactly do the Falcons rank among their peers? I mean, are they actual contenders, or are they just a massive rebuilding project that happens to be masquerading as a playoff hopeful?
Well, the early returns from the national media, they are shockingly, almost disrespectfully low. Think about this. Sports Illustrated's Matt Verderame went through and ranked the entire league, and he put the Stefanski and Michael Penix Jr. duo at number 24 overall. 24. That puts them squarely, undeniably in the bottom third of the National Football League. And what's absolutely crazy to me here is who they are grouped with. They are ranked just barely, and I mean barely, ahead of completely lost franchises like the Carolina Panthers and the New Orleans Saints. And if you actually dig into Verderame's methodology, this ranking is largely buoyed by the fact that Kevin Stefanski himself is ranked 17th among head coaches. So, what does that actually tell us? It means the anchor dragging this team down to number 24, the thing pulling them into the abyss, is almost entirely the extreme, terrifying uncertainty at the quarterback position.
And honestly, that brilliantly illustrates why there's still this undeniable pulsing current of underlying optimism in Atlanta despite that brutal ranking. Because Stefanski is inheriting an incredibly established, borderline terrifying offensive core. Just look at this absolute arsenal. You have an all-pro running back in Bijan Robinson to completely anchor the ground game and punish defenses. You have a second-team all-pro tight end in Kyle Pitts, an absolute freak of nature designed to command the middle of the field and create impossible mismatches. And you have a star wideout in Drake London dominating on the perimeter. It is a video game roster at the skill positions, and the experts, they believe this massive concentration of elite, top-tier talent can elevate the quarterback play literally regardless of who is actually taking the snaps. Stefanski's entire career track record is built on one thing: making quarterbacks look significantly better than they actually are by utilizing weapons exactly like these.
Which brings us to Section 2, the quarterback competition. And man, this is it. This is the crux of the entire 2026 season right here. This brings us directly to the most critical, high-stakes, cutthroat training camp battle on the entire roster. It is the ultimate drama of the summer, deciding who actually leads this offense out of the tunnel in Week 1 against a brutal Pittsburgh Steelers defense. Everything, and I mean everything, Stefanski wants to build completely hinges on getting this single monumental decision right. So the crucial point we have to examine is the absolute dead heat between Michael Penix Jr. and Tua Tagovailoa.
It is a fascinating yet slightly terrifying dynamic for Falcons fans. On one side, you have Penix. The guy is actively recovering from a torn ACL. Last season, let's be honest, he struggled mightily in his second NFL campaign. He posted a deeply concerning 60.1% completion rate and threw just 9 touchdowns in 9 games before going down. Then, on the exact opposite side of the ring, you have Tua. Tua signed a 1-year ultimate prove-it deal after being unceremoniously released by the Miami Dolphins. Think about the psychology here. Both of these men are quite literally fighting for their NFL lives. If they fail here, it might be over. And here is the craziest, most mind-bending part of this whole evaluation. They both tied for 25th in the NFL last year with an absolutely identical 88.5 passer rating. You literally cannot make that up. Neither guy has the upper hand. This is an entirely open, brutal competition born out of absolute mutual desperation.
But because of the immense, unforgiving physical toll of this sport and the severe, well-documented injury concerns surrounding both of these specific players, the narrative inside the building in Atlanta is quietly shifting. It's not just a debate anymore. It might not actually be a question of Tua or Penix. The Falcons front office is essentially placing a highly calculated, incredibly risky bet that the combination of these two quarterbacks, stitched together, will yield a healthy 17 games of solid playoff-caliber production. It's a patchwork strategy, a quarterback relay race. If one guy goes down, and history tells us one of them probably will, the other immediately steps in. And the hope is that the system, heavily buoyed by Stefanski's brain and that elite, unstoppable arsenal of weapons, just simply doesn't miss a beat. It's a fascinating gamble.
Let's transition to Section 3, the Jahan Dotson gamble.
Let's move over to the wide receiver room right now and see how this all builds into what has undoubtedly, without question, become the most heavily debated, heavily scrutinized, and polarizing move of the Falcons' entire offseason. Look, when you have quarterback uncertainty, like we just talked about, you need receivers who can separate quickly. You need guys who give your struggling QB an easy, wide-open target. But the route Atlanta actually chose to take to address this glaring need, it has left a lot of very smart football people completely scratching their heads. Atlanta went out and secured veteran receiver Jahan Dotson with a 2-year, $15 million contract. Now, $15 million might not sound like game-breaking money, but the number that really, truly matters here, the number that has everyone talking, is the guarantee. $10 million is fully, completely guaranteed. In the modern, salary cap-driven NFL, that is a highly significant financial commitment to hand over to a player who has simply not yet proven he can be a reliable, high-volume target at the professional level. It is, by every definition, a massive, multi-million-dollar gamble on untapped potential. And I'm telling you, the blowback from the analytical community was absolutely instant. It was loud. ESPN analyst Bill Barnwell openly, aggressively, and very publicly criticized the specific financial commitment. He absolutely did not mince his words here. He actively labeled the Dotson signing as the absolute worst move the Falcons made this entire offseason. Barnwell's argument is pretty straightforward. He argues that, sure, taking a low-risk, cheap flyer on a former first-round pick who needs a change of scenery, that's standard NFL practice. But handing out $10 million in locked-in guarantees to a player with Dotson's recent, highly questionable track record, Barnwell views that as a massive, unforced overpay. And if we just step back and look objectively, the hard data completely 100% backs up Barnwell's harsh criticism. Just look at these numbers. Over the past 4 years, Jahan Dotson has averaged just 0.9 yards per route run. Guys, that ranks a staggering, almost unbelievable 79th out of 80 qualified wide receivers in the National Football League. That is bottom of the barrel. What that stat actually means is that he fundamentally, consistently struggles to get open and command targets when he is on the field. In 17 total games with Philadelphia in 2025, he managed just 18 catches for 262 yards and a single solitary touchdown. The production, frankly, simply isn't there. It's a ghost town on the stat sheet. However, to be completely fair and impartial to the Falcons front office here, there is a financial escape hatch built into this deal. The team can cut him in 2027 to save $5 million against the cap if he continues to drastically underperform. So the bleed isn't permanent, but the initial sting is real. But conversely, the Atlanta Falcons are telling a completely different story. They're seeing something completely different when they put on the tape in that film room. They're banking heavily, almost entirely, on his raw physical profile. Pass game coordinator Tanner Engstrand came out and explicitly pointed out that they see elite speed. They see immense versatility. And most importantly, they see a player who plays so much bigger and more physical than his historically poor stats suggest. The Falcons are literally betting the house that a change of scenery, a new offensive scheme, combined with being the WR2 opposite an absolute gravity well like Drake London, will finally, magically unlock the massive upside of this 26-year-old former first-round pick. It is a quintessential high-risk, high-reward roll of the dice in the NFL.
Section 4. Revamping the Falcons' secondary.
Now, shifting our focus to the defensive side of the ball, we find another incredibly fascinating, high-tension narrative playing out right in front of us. This one is entirely centered around vulnerability, a desperate, frantic search for depth, and fierce, genuinely job-threatening competition in the defensive secondary. To really understand the sheer panic and urgency here, we have to look back at the nightmare of what happened last year. Veteran cornerback Mike Hughes, he saw his numbers completely, disastrously swell in 2025 after a really strong lockdown 2024 campaign where he allowed just 2 receptions and a measly 21 yards per game. Injuries across the roster forced him into highly vulnerable exposed situations, and his numbers skyrocketed. Suddenly, he was allowing 3.3 receptions and nearly 44 yards per game, giving up 4 total touchdowns in just 12 games. Opposing offensive coordinators smelled blood in the water, and they relentlessly, ruthlessly picked on him. But here's the bigger picture. More than just exposing Mike Hughes, this stretch exposed a severe, systemic, fatal lack of depth in the Falcons' defensive backfield. When one single guy went down, the entire structural integrity of the defense cracked and crumbled.
And let me tell you, you absolutely cannot survive in the modern pass-happy NFL with a porous secondary. You will get carved up every single Sunday. To address this massive, glaring liability, General Manager Ian Cunningham took incredibly aggressive, immediate action in the draft. He didn't wait around. He used a highly premium second-round pick, number 48 overall, to draft cornerback Avieon Terrell. And let's be crystal clear about something. This was not a pick for a developmental sit-on-the-bench project. No, this was a pick specifically designed to bring immediate, disruptive, starting caliber play to both the inside and outside of this defense. And by doing so, by making that call, Cunningham put veteran Mike Hughes squarely, undeniably on notice. Your job is no longer safe. Which brings us to Section 5, embracing the mentorship role. Look, we know how this usually goes. When a team drafts your direct replacement in the second round, the natural, completely understandable human reaction is often deep bitterness. It creates division in the locker room. It's about protecting your territory and icing the new guy out. But rather than showing animosity toward the young rookie drafted to potentially end his entire run in Atlanta, Mike Hughes is doing something different. He's offering an incredibly refreshing, staggeringly mature perspective on this whole tense situation. Hughes' reaction is literally the textbook definition of a professional. Recalling his own days, years ago, as a highly touted rookie coming in and challenging established grumpy veterans back in Minnesota, Hughes is openly, willingly embracing the battle. He stood up and stated, "All that does is bring competition into the room, and it makes everybody better." He isn't hiding the playbook. He isn't giving the kid the cold shoulder. He is actively mentoring Avieon Terrell through every step of OTAs and training camp, knowing full well that iron sharpens iron. It is the exact, perfect culture a coaching staff literally prays for when they inject high-end youth into an aging veteran room. But don't get it twisted. Hughes isn't just handing over the keys. He has a secret weapon of his own to fight off this rookie. Absolute continuity. For the very first time in his entire Falcons tenure, he actually gets to play under a returning defensive coordinator. Jeff Ulbrich is back for a second season, and he's bringing the exact same scheme that helped this defense rank 15th overall last year. But more crucially, that scheme generated an incredibly violent, disruptive pass rush that ranked second in the entire league in total sacks. Hughes is banking on the fact that not having to learn a completely new playbook from scratch will allow him to deeply refine his mental game. He can diagnose plays a split second faster, he can anticipate routes instead of reacting to them, and he can return to his dominant, lockdown 2024 form. The physical battle out there on the grass? Sure, that's against the rookie. But the mental battle, the chess match, that is exactly where Mike Hughes fully plans to win his starting job back.
So we step back and we look at the grand puzzle of this franchise. A brand new, highly touted head coach implementing a proven, complex offensive system. A quarterback room defined by equal parts sheer desperation and theoretical potential. A massive $15 million gamble on Jahan Dotson that has the entire analytical world shaking its head. And a defense desperately forging its depth through the intense fire of rookie competition. It is a lot to process. So, as the 2026 season rapidly approaches, we have to ask ourselves the ultimate question. Will these high-stakes, pressure cooker training camp battles actually forge a resilient, battle-tested roster capable of finally dominating the NFC South? Or will the massive, structural risks taken on the offensive side of the ball just blow up in their faces, leaving the Falcons searching for answers once again in a matter of months? That tension, that unknown, that is exactly what makes this game so incredibly captivating. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. If you enjoyed this cinematic deep dive, do not forget to subscribe to NFL Nexus right now, leave a comment with your thoughts, and I will see you in the next one.